Hello, everybody. My name is Kate. I would go by Ghosty online. Um, my makeup is pretty fucked up tonight, but you know we're rolling with it. Tonight I wanted to make a video. It's been like way too long. Once again, like I say this in every single one of my videos. I really want to at least try to get down to like a weekly basis. Maybe I'm gonna start doing these these videos on like the weekends. Um, we'll see. I'm gonna try to establish some kind of regular pattern, just because I want to kind of treat it almost like a vlog or like a journal. But in any case, I did want to make a kind of shortish video today, kind of talking about something that's been on my mind a lot recently, in the past couple, really actually for the past couple years. So I would say it started like around 2 years ago. Um, and around 2 years ago, I was in a brief communication with a psychologist over the phone. We met on a weekly basis for not that long, maybe 2 or 3 months, um, and we had video calls over the phone. And one of the things that she told me was that she believed that it was, in her opinion, she thought that I had ADHD or ADD. Um, it's kind of classified a little differently now. And to be honest, there's still quite a lot of research that I myself could likely do into the topic. Uh, but in any case, she told me that she thought that I exhibited traits of someone who had ADD, and I initially my response was that that wasn't likely. Um, I had never been, as far as I was aware, screened for it. Um, but, like I had gotten through school fairly well. I never really particularly struggled in school until college came around. And then I don't know what it was specifically now that it's been a couple years past that was, giving her the impression that I may be an individual who struggles with this. um, but that was something that she expressed, not necessarily that it was her opinion that I did, but it was her opinion that I might. And so to this day, I still don't have a solid diagnosis on ADD. I haven't been seeing a therapist or psychologist regularly for a long time. That's something that I very much am planning on doing in the future, that I'm very interested in doing going forward. However, I still see all of these like uh, kind of um, kind of crazy like reels and stuff on ADD. And when I say crazy, as in like crazy, as in like it slaps me in the face, right? Like so obvious that what they're describing is something that I myself have struggled with. And one thing that really resonated with me recently that I saw was a big part of the adult with ADD is still like the mind of the child that was like constantly on edge and constantly watching, constantly alert, having to be constantly aware. And that spoke to me on a very deep level, in multiple ways. Um, for one, growing up, there was constantly very stringent expectations for me to fulfill. Everybody has that. Then, of course, there was a lot of arguing in the household. I think a lot of households struggle with that too. But what the memory, whenever I heard or saw that reel, the memory that flooded back to me in a very visceral sense was the memory of that I have still to this day of myself as a kid. Um, whenever I was young, for a while, I lived with my dad, and my mother, my biological mother, had no part in my life or my brother's life for a number of years, I want to say. And whenever she finally did come to be a part of our lives, it was 50-50, or not 50-50, excuse me. It was primary custody with my father, and my mother would get weekends every other weekend. So it was, you know, I I think I struggle with this a lot because, growing up until that point, I was very attached to my mother. I think a lot of young kids are, but myself especially, I was very much a mama's boy. I associated a lot with my mother, and I think I still do to this day. Like, I look like my mom. I act in a lot of ways like my mom. I understand that a lot of my mental health issues come from my mom, and from her genetics. And so I've always felt this, like, this bond or this closeness, I guess, with my mother in particular. And so, anyways, there was a period of time in my life growing up where I was living with my dad, and every other weekend I would go and stay with my mom. And then in summers and certain holidays, etc. Pretty standard arrangement. I think like half of people growing up my age have a similar arrangement to this, right? Um, but the memory that I had whenever I saw that reel that was explaining the mentality of the ADHD adult, the memory I had was of myself as a young 8, 9, or 10-year old, waiting, uh, waiting all night sometimes, because whenever I would go to my mom's place on the weekends, a lot of the time she would come. She'd come on time. She'd pick us up. We'd drive to her place and we'd spend the weekend there, and it was fine. But there were also a lot of times where she didn't show up on time. There were times where she didn't show up at all. And I remember just very vividly nights of sitting there. In the house we lived in at the time, um, when I was living with my dad, we had this windows on either side of the door. These like narrow windows, and I would sit in the foyer of the house, next to the front door, and look out that narrow window and wait and hope that my mother would come driving in through the driveway. And sometimes she would, sometimes she was just running a couple hours late, but there were nights that she wouldn't. There were nights that I would be there for 3, 4, 5 hours and nothing. And I think that in a lot of ways, like, me as an adult, I'm still there. I'm still sitting in front of that window, like waiting for something to happen, waiting for someone to arrive. But I also feel like there's this huge part of me that wants to like pick up that kid and say, like, you don't need to wait here for anyone. You can go and find your own way. Um, I guess um, we're all kind of torn between those two things, between trying to find and relive our past, and then also trying to discover who we are and trying to move our way into the future. But this was just something that was, I guess, on my mind. I'm having a really hard time speaking once again. Um, I guess I can briefly just say, I believe I mentioned it previously, but I do take a number of medications that make it kind of difficult for me to speak and to articulate myself, to find the right words and stuff. So I really appreciate anybody who's watching. I really appreciate you bearing with me. Um, but until next time, it's been a lot of fun, and I'll see you then.